This is Antoinette James, one voice belonging to We the People. Notre Dame Cathedral, the what, the when, the where, the why, and the who. On the 15th of April 2019, Notre Dame Cathedral, Paris, burst into flames, destroying the spire and much of the roof. For many, this event was of little consequence in the big scheme of things. For others, a victory over opposing ideologies, and yet others, a signal of something more fundamental, the loss of heritage and culture. Whatever one's stance, it was clearly a significant gesture of the passing of Christianity in France. To understand why French authorities, within hours of the fire, seem more intent on sidestepping the hard questions, one needs to understand Notre Dame's backstory and who were to gain from the incident. The year 2018 alone saw over 800 arson attacks on churches throughout France, with relative silence by Western media. The arsons were in part protests from Islamic groups, left-wing social warriors triggered by misogyny and anti-patriarchal ideologies in a country that is officially humanistic. However, this social humanism is only a thin, exoteric veneer that parasites itself upon an esoteric pagan and papal Roman history, a history of holy wars and conquests against Muslim, Christians, and Jewish heretics. Yet Notre Dame Cathedral's dirty secret is that it is not Roman Catholic, even though Roman Catholic services were conducted within its walls and was once openly owned by the Vatican. Esoteric Roman Catholicism needs to be separated from esoteric to understand why she, the pagan church, the mother church as she calls herself, must veil herself in Christianity. In short, papal Rome is pagan Rome in disguise. Pagan Rome was saturated in the all-controlling totalitarian Mithra one-world religion. It was this religion that Constantine hid nefariously out of sight within the Christian faith, then had the gall to call this new blended religion Romanism. It is pagan Rome's agenda, known as Agenda 21 today, to regain the supremacy of the world and reveal her true pagan Mithra religion. Papal Rome was known as Romanism for centuries, but rebranded herself as Roman Catholic Church some 200 years ago to cover her tracks. There has been no official horror from the Vatican at the hit Christianity took by the fire, nor outrage at the cathedral's restoration plans. Notre Dame Cathedral has held tightly to esoteric mysteries and practices, while slowly crumbling physically over centuries of France's ever-changing social and political terrain. The impressive, yet oppressive cathedral was the colossal endeavour of the Knight Templars, who funded its construction on top of a burnt-out pagan temple to Jupiter. The Templars adhered to a spiritual blend of ancient mystery religion of Mithraism and the Jewish occult mystic religion of Kabbalism, both a type of worship to Jupiter. The Templars adopted Kabbalism while they resided in Jerusalem in the 1st century AD in the guise of running a hospital there. The Templars today, as in the 1st century, are a powerful and rich order who do their work behind the philanthropic shopfront organizations. These are easy to identify as they still bear the Maltese cross. A perfect example of this is St. John's Ambulance Service. Kabbalah was and still is a deeply sinister and erotic religion, hitting the heights of popularity in the 13th century before being disapproved of. In the 19th century, Madame Helena Petrovna Blavatsky started the New Age movement, using the Kabbalah mystic secrets blended with Egyptian and Babylonian ancient mystery religion, calling it Theosophy. After her death, Alice Bailey of Lucifer Trust, now the United Nations Lucas Trust, with its esoteric logo, developed the religion further. It is this Jupiter worship religion, the seat of the UN, steered through the late Maurice Strong, who spearheaded UNESCO. UNESCO's primary goal is to usher in a one-world religion of Mithraism, UN and UNESCO documentations lay this out very clearly. The Roman Catholic singer Madonna, reported to be the former Luciferian high priestess, adheres to Kabbalism and is the poster child for the ancient mystery religion. The ancient mystic religion of Johannism, belonging to the secret Jesuit society made up partly of the Templars, has been handed down through the millennia and operates in Jesuit-run Masonic masonry today. Holding annual St. John's Day celebrations, the public are told they are celebrating John the Baptist of the Bible. The New Age movement, with paranormal visitations supposedly from the Virgin Mary, alien abductions, and mysticism are all part of Johannism, endorsed by the Vatican and its first ever Jesuit Pope Francis. He took his name from Francis Xavier, a roommate of Ignatius of Loyola, a chronically depressed Venetian nobleman commissioned to start the order. Albert Pike, a 33-degree Freemason, wrote in the Bible of Freemasonry, Morals and Dogma, quote, "The Templars, like all other secret orders and associations, had two doctrines, one concealed and reserved for the masters, which was Johannism, the other public, which was Roman Catholic," unquote. And this is further confirmed in the Digest of Masonic Law. Quote, "Masonry, created from Rosicrucian, has nothing to do with the Bible. It is not founded upon the Bible, for if it were, it would not be Masonry, it would be something else," unquote. The non-Christian Templars ran the papal monetary system, to be ousted when it was discovered they were defrauding the Pope. The Vatican hunted them down and killed them. However, not all knights were disposed of. Many went underground. The Vatican fought the knights who were absorbed by the politically driven, power-hungry Jesuit order. This forced the papacy to banish the Jesuit order from Europe. In fact, European monarchies and beyond banished the order from their borders for over 500 years. The society was illegal in 83 countries. Japan was so appalled by their corruption, they would not even allow one European to set foot upon their soil for over 200 years. Pope Clement XIV banished the order in the 18th century, then feared for his life. Quote, "The suppression is accomplished. I do not repent of it, having only resolved on it after examining and weighing everything, and because I thought it necessary for the Church. If it were not done, I would do it now, but this suppression will be my death," unquote. The Jesuit Templars did not take this at all well, and in 1774, Pope Clement was poisoned and died of a slow and painful inflamed bowel condition. He said, quote, "Alas, I knew they would poison me, but I did not expect to die in so slow and cruel manner," unquote. 40 years later, in 1814, the Jesuit order returned to Europe with a vengeance by papal bull under the bought and paid for Pope Pius VII. Friedrich von Hardenberg, in the 18th century, a German philosopher, said of the works of the order, quote, "Never before in the course of the whole world's history had such a society appeared. The old Roman Senate itself did not lay schemes for world domination with greater certainty of success," unquote. This esoteric political philosophy still embraces Notre Dame Cathedral today. Notre Dame is no different than many other Roman Catholic cathedrals and churches throughout Europe, being built on the ruins of a papal Roman worship, which in turn was built on the ruins of a pagan Roman temple of the head pagan god Jupiter. In the early 1100s, the great philosopher Peter Abelard taught at the Paris school where Notre Dame stands today. Students from all over Europe flocked there for centuries to hear the latest philosophical teachings, and it inevitably became a spiritual centre as well. A cult had been developing around its local martyr St. Denis. According to tradition, Denis was beheaded on the hill of Montmartre in the second half of the 3rd century AD. It is said he ran for miles carrying his severed head. Where he stopped running, a basilica was built in the 12th century to honour him. It was here the Templars erected the austere, dominant pagan Gothic architecture as a powerful snub to the Vatican, complete with towering spire, a phallic symbol belonging to Nimrod. More about him shortly. Time magazine, page 112, 1955 publication, states, quote, "On their island in the Seine, Paris Christians, that's Catholics, first carried stones to the site of Notre Dame around the 6th century. The church they built was razed by the Normans in the middle of the 9th century. A new basilica of Notre Dame lasted the better part of another 3 centuries, but by 1140 it was too small. A year or so before, a bold, bright farm boy from the province was drawn to the intellectual beehive of the schools of Paris, and in the next 2 decades climbed the ecclesiastical ladder to become Bishop of Paris," unquote. That bishop was Maurice de Sully, who admired the Basilica of St. Denis and decided to build it into a cathedral dedicated to the Virgin Mary. Time magazine continues, quote, "Maurice de Sully was a practical dreamer with a vision. The grand design of Notre Dame as it stands today was largely his. He raised the money, he met the payroll and disciplined the workforce. He personally selected leading artists and chose the subjects of the complex iconography," unquote. Stephen Murray, professor of medieval art history emeritus at Columbia University, said, quote, "The King of France wanted to build a magnificent cathedral to show that Paris was the political and economic capital of France," unquote. Laurent Ferry, the former conservator of patrimony at the French National Archives, stated, "When he says Christian, think Roman Catholic, as Christians were being persecuted and killed at the time." Quote, "There was a strong alliance between church and state, and this idea that France was first among the Christian realms, so the largest and the most magnificent cathedral would have to be in Paris," unquote. And so Notre Dame's construction began in 1163, during the reign of King Louis VII, with the first stone being laid in a lavish ceremony by Pope Alexander III. The Hiram Key by Christopher Knight and Robert Lomas states, quote, "In a single century, from 1170, no fewer than 80 cathedrals and almost 500 abbeys were built in France alone, involving more masonry than was ever cut in ancient Egypt. These buildings were built to a startling new scale never seen before," unquote. Over the next 2 to 3 centuries, Gothic elements and the stained glass rose window were added to the cathedral. However, by the 16th century, Notre Dame's grandeur started to fade, reflecting the loss of dominance of the Roman Catholic political machine, the Vatican. Martin Luther's Protestant Reformation set the people free. Notre Dame's pagan rituals stopped with the return of Christianity. When non-Catholic French Huguenots destroyed some of the idolatrous statues, no eyebrows were raised. The Vatican no longer could fleece the sheep for maintenance. To add insult to injury, it then fell subject to the whims of King Louis XIV. The National Geographic wrote, quote, "In the middle of the reign of Louis XIV, the venerable cathedral faced a radical and controversial makeover. The rood screen, studded with sculptures, was pulled down. The stained glass windows from the 12th and 13th centuries were replaced with clear glass. Only the 3 Notre Dame rose windows retain much of their original glazing. A pillar of the central doorway was demolished to allow grand processional carriages to pass through," unquote. Notre Dame Cathedral saw more changes during the Jesuit-funded and devised 1789 French Revolution. The order took power by destroying French culture, replacing it with the dictatorial Jesuit-run socialist-style democratic republic. Robespierre, who had spent over 9 years being trained by the Jesuits in their college of Louis le Grand, led the Jacobeans. Louis XVI, his Habsburg queen Marie Antoinette, who had resisted the order, and her mother, Archduchess Maria Theresa, who had expelled the Jesuits from Austria, lost their heads by the guillotine in a revengeful purging. Their young son Louis was cruelly tortured and murdered. It was Robespierre's Jacobean revolutionaries who caused considerable damage to Notre Dame. Dozens of statues were destroyed. The bishop's palace was burnt to the ground to never be rebuilt. The spire was deconstructed due to wind damage, and according to the National Geographic, the lead from the roof was stripped for bullets, and the bronze bells were melted down for cannons. In 1793, the anti-royalists stormed the cathedral, removing her Christian veil, exposing her paganism, renaming her Temple of Reason. They removed and decapitated statues that they incorrectly thought represented French kings, to be found by archaeologists in 1977 and reinstalled. By the end of the French Revolution, Notre Dame was a shadow of its former self. The cult of reason was France's first established state-sponsored so-called atheistic religion that reinstated pagan feasts, naming one of the feasts the Feast of Reason. The Roman Catholic veil was removed as pagan gods came out of the closet. The Temple of Reason was then renamed the Temple of Philosophy for the cult of the Supreme Being. We know from Jesuit Freemasonry writings that the Supreme Being is Lucifer. In 1794, Notre Dame Cathedral hosted the Festival of the Supreme Being, a massive celebration that included music, parades, pageantry, seductively dressed actresses portraying the goddess of reason or goddess of liberty, Astarte, reminiscent of the Middle Ages when the cathedral played host to the annual Feast of Fools, which in turn was a throwback to ancient pagan rites centering on raucous ceremony. Modern-day extensions of the pagan ritual can be seen in May Day ceremonies and the resurrection of the celebrations such as Halloween in the West. Napoleon Bonaparte, championing on behalf of the Vatican in 1801, banned both the Jesuit Feasts of Reason and the Feast of the Supreme Being with his law on cults, forcing Notre Dame Cathedral to slip back into her papal veil and then add her second veil of Christianity. At the time, the Inquisition rounded up true Christians for imprisonment or death. Fox's Book of Martyrs tells their story, a book that Queen Elizabeth I of England ordered to be chained alongside the Protestant Bible in all Protestant pulpits in her realm as a reminder of Vatican and Jesuit tyranny. In 1801, Napoleon also signed a concord with the Holy See to take back control of Notre Dame because his coronation ceremony was to take place there. The cathedral also hosted his marriage to Josephine. After the 2019 fire, Dr. Emily Dury told History Extra something very revealing. Quote, "Even during the French Revolution, we did not have half this level of destruction. What took place during the French Revolution was targeted iconoclasm. Holy images were destroyed because of the perception that they were associated with the ancient regime of old Catholic traditions and tyranny. It was an attempt to destroy Notre Dame's power. This fire is a very different type of destruction." Unquote. Yes, the 2019 fire is not so much a power shift as a casting aside of its Christian veil and a tentative unveiling of papal Rome, enough to show pagan Rome's intentions. The Roman Catholic Church really had no interest in the tired, outdated Gothic structure that their enemies constructed. It languished in disrepair, continuing to decay. And in fact, the Vatican had plans to pull it down, but support for its restoration was given a timely boost by the 1831 publication of Victor Hugo's emotional call to the people, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, a book that set its scene in the cathedral's 1400s heyday. Hugo devoted 2 whole chapters indulging in its uniqueness, describing the cathedral in detail. His hunchback, Quasimodo, who found sanctuary in Notre Dame, was the emotional symbol to enthuse a love for the Gothic building of Paris. It worked, sparking a campaign for its restoration. In 1844, in direct answer to the Romantic literary movement, Hugo's book, quote, seized upon the cathedral as a symbol of France's glorious Christian past, unquote. Napoleon II commissioned the 20-year rebuild of the spire, resurfacing of stonework, restoration of statues, construction of a new vestry and organ, reglazing of the stained glass windows, flying buttress, and adding the famous gargoyles, including the vampire that sits on the top of the cathedral's north tower. A century later, the Vatican handed the continuing expensive problem over to the French government, who currently own it. They have used taxpayer money and donations to keep it from collapsing for the last 100 years. An attempt to destroy the cathedral during World War I failed, so the Vatican-backed and funded Hitler was given the task. He bungled the Holy See's commissioned final solution for the cathedral, and it remained standing. According to the Washington Post, in 1914, more than 24 German shells hit the cathedral, and the wooden scaffolding was set on fire, which in turn lit the oak of the roof. Quote, the lead used to seal the roof melted, which in turn set the wooden pews on fire. Stained glass windows and pillars in sanctuary were destroyed, unquote. The Holy See underestimated the cathedral's significance, building its snakehead reception auditorium beside Vatican City, which has inspired no one. Knowing the people's love for the Gothic architecture over a snakehead increases speculation of an inside job. If the people will not come to the snake auditorium, the Vatican, the word Vatican means divining serpent, the Vatican would need to refit Notre Dame in line with its esoteric doctrines. Notre Dame Cathedral has been the place where dozens of events have taken place. Many royal coronations, including the crowning of the boy King Henry VI in 1431, 2 years after his coronation at Westminster Abbey in 1429. Weddings including James V, King of Scotland in 1537, the marriage of Mary, Queen of Scots, to her first husband in 1558, and King Charles I of England, marriage by proxy in 1625, shortly after his ascension to the throne. Notre Dame has been the place of numerous requiem masses for presidents, most notably Charles de Gaulle, who led the French resistance against Nazi Germany in the Second World War, and François Mitterrand, the President of France from 1981 to 1995. It has also been the place where the papacy has conducted its business. In 1909, Joan of Arc was beatified by Pope Pius X in heralding her entrance into heaven. She is the French heroine who led an army to victory over the English during the 100-Year War, then later was burnt at the stake as a heretic by the English. Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI was the last pope to conduct Mass at the cathedral in 2008, saying, quote, "We are gathered in the Mother Church of the Diocese of Paris, Notre Dame Cathedral, which rises in the heart of the city as a living sign of God's presence in our midst. My predecessor, Pope Alexander III, laid its first stone, and Popes Pius VII and John Paul II honoured it with their presence. I am happy to follow in their footsteps," unquote. It was Pope John Paul who called Christians ravaging wolves. Criminal trials and executions were also conducted at the cathedral. In 1314, Jacques de Molay, the Grand Master of the Templars, was slowly burnt at the stake for unspeakable debauchery. De Molay ranted like a madman in his last moments, using his magical powers to cast a curse on all who had a hand in his demise. The first to succumb was King Philip IV of France, who died before the year was out, at age 46. On the 18th of March, de Molay's day of execution, modern Templar organizations regularly celebrate Mass at the cathedral. In 2018, they commemorated celebrating the 900-year anniversary of the foundation of the order. Masonic Masons have de Molay youth groups that run in honor of him today. Perhaps lesser known was the part that the cathedral played in the lucrative Jesuit-run slave trade that reached as far south as Africa and west to the native people of the continent of North America. No one can forget the infamous Jesuit Paraguay reductions, a communist test case. Notre Dame also housed the relics of Saint Denis and Saint Genevieve, the patron saints of Paris. According to Laurent Ferry, the Roman Catholic Archbishop of Paris put the saints' relics inside the spire to protect the building in 1935. Rescued from the flames were 3 beehives that had been situated on the first floor of the cathedral roof since 2013, holding 60,000 bees per hive. Notre Dame, in line with ancient mystery religions such as Catholicism, Freemasonry, Mormonism, and Luciferianism, keep beehive symbols. I talk more about this in my podcast, Hidden in Plain Sight. Link in the description. And lastly, Notre Dame Cathedral in 1991 was declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site, a, quote, architectural masterpiece, unquote. The UN is the Vatican's covert method of bringing in the New World Order, and it created UNESCO to conduct land grabs for the elite around the globe. This brings us to the week of the fire. The notion that the fire was carefully and purposefully lit finds support when viewed with a wider lens. So-called coincidences are numerous and usually present in elite false flag events. 1. Coincidentally, a very suspicious fire on another important elite ancient mystery religious site, the Cathedral of St. John the Divine in New York, USA. It was constructed in 1892, sitting beside a Masonic lodge. It coincidentally experienced the fire in the crypt only days before Notre Dame. Remember, John denotes the pagan worship of Johannism. To further join the dots, in 1925, March Masonic World Magazine, Volume 2, Number 2, St. John the Divine, although unfinished, had cover billing. A generous article hailed the cathedral, quote, "It is particularly fitting that the Masons who were the principal builders of the cathedrals and churches during the greatest cathedral building period should now have a prominent part in the movement to build America's great cathedral," unquote. Leader Scott in The Cathedral Builders, the story of the Great Masonic Guild, says, quote, "Little needs to be added to the story of Freemasonry during the cathedral building period. Its monuments are its best history, alike of its genius, its faith, and its symbols, as witness the triangle and the circle, which form the keystone of ornamental tracery of every Gothic temple. Masonry was then at the zenith of its power, in its full splendor," unquote. The Cathedral of St. John the Divine's 2019 fire was a token. A prior and larger fire destroyed part of the north transept and organ in 2001, coincidentally the same year that the Twin Towers fell. It was reopened in 2008, just in time for the stock market crash. It was also closed during the Jesuit-run World War I and World War II. I guess they were too busy during those years. St. John the Divine is the place where graphic satanic rituals in extravaganzas and pageants take place annually. Engraved on the columns that were added in 1997 are elite announcements of manufactured events yet to happen, such as the Rockefeller-funded and built Twin Tower tragedy in New York that many experts say had detonators planted into the infrastructure during its construction. Other columns announce the rebirth of Venus or the New World religion, Kabbalah symbols, the destruction of Washington, destruction of Wall Street monetary system, destruction of the Statue of Liberty and Brooklyn Bridge. In the grounds, you can see esoteric ancient mystery sculptures of owls symbolizing Moloch and child sacrifices, sun, and also the Eye of Lucifer. Inside houses the esoteric dome of sun worship, the Black Madonna being Isis and Horus of the ancient mystery religion, and the Knights of the Templar sacrificial lamb, also seen around the City of London, England. The City of London is not owned by England, but the Vatican. It is the Vatican's financial headquarters for the world's fiat monetary system. Coincidentally, just days before the fire, 16 8-foot copper statues were removed from the cathedral. Before being carried away by helicopter, they had their heads removed with a blowtorch. This seems a very heavy-handed way to treat old and valuable treasures. No answer has been forthcoming except the announcement that they were taken and beheaded as part of their restoration, a strange restoration procedure. This brings us to the coincidences on the day of the fire. One, coincidentally, there were other fires on the day, namely the Al-Aqsa Mosque, considered to be the third holiest site in Islam after Mecca and Medina. The Palestine news agency and Gulf News published that the Al-Aqsa fire broke out in the guards room near the roof of the prayer room. Although the flames threatened the 2,000-year-old section of the mosque, the Times of Israel reported that the firefighters were able to successfully contain the blaze. 2. Coincidentally, Pope Francis visited Nazi Ratzinger Acker Pope Benedict XVI with Easter and birthday greetings for the following day, the 16th of April. It was highly unusual that the two should gather together, since they rarely crossed paths, yet on the very day of the fire they sat together to have a photo op while watching the cathedral alight on television. It did not go unnoticed that Pope Francis remained silent until the day after the fire. 3. Notre Dame, aka Our Lady, coincidentally caught fire right at the beginning of the Roman Catholic Holy Week, their ancient pagan 2-week Beltane or fire festival, hailing back to ancient Egyptian return of the sun worshipping ritual. It is the largest of its kind, celebrated by occultists and witches worldwide. People jump through the fire as the flames, smoke, and ashes are deemed to have protective powers. It ends between April the 30th and May the 1st, the day Adam Weishaupt funded the Illuminati order in 1776 for Jesuits to disappear into during their expulsion. There is conjecture that Macron's handlers arranged for the cathedral fire to boost his fast-waning public support and to conjure up power for his government. This sounds strange for a world leader, but to become a world leader of note, that leader will be a Luciferian sun worshipper. Macron ran for president as a new fresh face, but he is a Rothschild progeny. 4. Coincidentally, activity on the roof an hour before the fire was caught on amateur camera. The footage is fuzzy, but an individual is seen causing a couple of flashes of light before leaving. There has been no official explanation for the sighting. Considering the strict security, someone knows something but is not talking. Another figure, also male, was seen on the top balcony during the fire. At first, some suspected an Islamic terrorist, but then it was thought less sinister but spooky. At first glance, he looks for all the world like an apparition of the Knights Templar in traditional ancient dress. As there have been ghosts seen at the cathedral, this did not sound too far-fetched. However, by examining better footage, the figure has been identified as a fire warden checking for anyone caught in the building. 5. Amazingly coincidental is that 2 fires started at the same time in 2 separate places within the cathedral. The fire and smoke warning systems were state-of-the-art, and the cathedral was manned 24/7, leaving experts baffled. In an interview, Michel Picot, the boss of Reconstruction Fund and member of Friends of Notre Dame, was interviewed. The Friends of Notre Dame, by the way, is a US-based foundation. Picot stated, quote, "The fire started up near the rooftop while another fire started in the north bell tower. All damage seems to be high, and it did not go into the lower part of the church or touch the organ or stained glass windows," unquote. 6. Unusually, perhaps fortunately, but definitely very conveniently, the renovation workers were not in attendance that fateful day. The building had been evacuated, along with some precious pieces of art sacred to the elites. 7. Macron's government ruled out arson before the fire was extinguished and before any forensic investigation could be carried out. How did they know? And why did they choose to shut down conversation, discussion, and inquiry? 8. Ave Maria, one of the best known and beloved pieces of Roman Catholic religious music, was sung by many who stood around and watched the flames consume the spire. The version written by Franz Schubert is widely sung at Roman Catholic masses and other religious ceremonies. It is a translation from Latin of the famous Roman Catholic Hail Mary prayer people offer to the Virgin Mary. The second part of the prayer says, quote, "Hail Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, pray for us," unquote. This is an odd abeyance, for the Bible clearly forbids prayer to anyone but God through the mediator, Christ Jesus. The origins of this odd Roman Catholic doctrine will be exposed shortly. 9. More often than not, an elite person is located near such tragic events. John Podesta in New Zealand, days before the Christchurch false flag event. On the same day that Nancy Pelosi visited Derry in Belfast, a journalist, Lyra McKee, was shot dead. She was about to write a book about pedophilia activity in high places. At the Notre Dame fire, coincidentally, the former First Lady Michelle Obama was on a dinner cruise promoting her book Becoming Michelle, further fueling notions of an esoteric title, and that she may just have been Michael before becoming Michelle. Many people claim she is transgender, including Joan Rivers, who was murdered shortly after revealing this to a journalist. Barack Obama, on mentioning her in speeches and interviews, was caught out at least 3 times saying Michael and I. Michelle was angled, or at least the photographer was angled, to get the burning cathedral reflecting in her wine glass while partying on the Seine. She was coincidentally wearing a necklace with the word burning written in silver, and her hand in one photo is on her chest as in Freemasonry. In her March 2009 Vogue cover photo shoot, she exhibits a Luciferian hand signal. All this raising speculation that Notre Dame was not an accidental fire. In the pursuing days after the fire, there were the usual interviews and sentiments and actions worthy of sifting through to help build a picture. We understand wood burns, and a fire can take hold very quickly. However, this is not always so. The 1,200 oak trees cut to build Notre Dame spire were some 800 years old. Hardwood this old does not burn easily. Let's hear from French experts who have dedicated their lives to the cathedral. Benjamin Mouton, former chief architect of the cathedral, charged with its safety, including structural integrity, electrical compliance, and fire detection for 13 years, in an interview after the fire, could not understand how the fire could have taken hold. He said there would have had to have been a fuse or an explosion to cause such a fire. He was stunned and bewildered. Quote, You know, oak that is 800 years old, it's very hard. To burn it, well, I've never tried, but oak, old oak, phew, it's not obvious at all. You would need a lot of kindling to succeed. I don't have any hypothesis that I could tell you. Which hypothesis could I propose? That it was quick? I'm lost in conjectures. You know, we did in Notre Dame just before I retired, meaning in the 90s, we updated all the electrical wiring of Notre Dame, so there's no possibility of a short circuit. We updated to the contemporary norms, even going very far. All the detection and protection against the fire in the cathedral, with elements for measurement, indicators of aspiration, and so on, which allow us to detect a beginning of a fire. At the bottom of the cathedral, I had 2 men at all times who were there day and night, and who are there to go and have a look the minute there is an alarm, and to call the firefighters the minute there's no doubt." Unquote. Indeed, Notre Dame was a heavily guarded building, yet the fire was not isolated quickly. It took 35 minutes for the fire brigade to arrive. The cathedral sits beside a body of water, yet little effort was made to control it quickly. Notre Dame's bells are known historically to herald the end of elites' wicked endeavours. They declare to the elites a work well done. Notre Dame's most famous bell, Emmanuel, has tolled at most major events in the history of France, including the coronation of kings, papal visits, and to mark the end of the 2 Jesuit-choreographed world wars, including the 1944 liberation of France. It was also rung to mark the destruction of the Twin Towers of New York's World Trade Center in 2001. The extent of the damage to the bells remains unclear, but all the cathedrals in France that had bells pealed in declaration at the same hour several days after the event. In the 2012 7-minute Canadian esoteric animated film I, Pet Goat 2, there was a symbolic burning of a cathedral many believe was a typical hidden in plain sight announcement by the elite of the deliberate burning of Notre Dame. In the context of the film, it overtly symbolized the end of Christianity. Fast forward 7 years to 2019 Eurovision Song Contest, a feast and celebration of the elite Luciferian culture. We see also a celebration of the end of the Christian era and the birth of the one world Mithra religion. After the Roman Catholic-led, run and choreographed ecumenical movement in the 1970s, which started an avalanche of Gnostic Catholic doctrine in Protestant churches, further accentuated by the King James Protestant Bible, extensively made obsolete, many Christians in the West have no knowledge of their history. Notre Dame fire and Madonna's Eurovision performance symbolized death to Christianity, making way for Pope Francis' new religion of Chrislam. It was no surprise that the opening of Madonna's performance had a Freemasonry stare of enlightenment, with Notre Dame's shadow cast upside down in Luciferian custom on the stairs, and an upside-down Luciferian cross used by the Roman Catholic Church, the ancient Egyptian symbol of victory of Satan over God. Madonna's Eurovision performance signalled to the Luciferian elites that it is also the end of Roman Catholic exoteric era. In her Eurovision performance, she was Isis of the Mithra religion. She slipped off an ill-fitting Roman Catholic costume, revealing her more suited Mithraic attire. No surprises then that Madonna was chosen, since Notre Dame means Our Lady, Madonna, the Queen of Heaven, esoterically Our Lady Ishtar. We'll address this more fully shortly. The 2019 Eurovision Song Contest ceremony was put together some months, if not a year, before the Notre Dame fire. To organise such events takes months and months of marketing, fundraising, choreographing sequences, stage and costume management and rehearsals, way before the deliberate fire. 2019 Eurovision was a celebration of the beginning of the end, a celebration of the coming of the new one world order and the return of the old Mithras one world religion coddled for centuries inside the Vatican. Remember, the bells of Notre Dame chimed after significant events. So here in the Eurovision performance, the first sound is the bells chiming, the end of the old, before Madonna, Ishtar, rose like a phoenix in rebirth. To emphasize this, a skull in line graphics was projected onto the backdrop, speaking of Golgotha, the hill of skulls where Jesus was crucified. And to emphasize this sacrifice, as Luciferians see it, of Jesus, monks were heard chanting as in pagan ceremonies when babies and virgins were sacrificed to Moloch. A line in one of the songs Madonna sings, quote, "falling out of the sky," unquote, refers to the Bible telling of Lucifer cast out of heaven. Madonna's performance ends with a robotic AI voice warning that the people will have to change or they will not be able to live. In pagan hypnotic mind control NLP repetitiveness, the audience is warned. Are we watching the announcement of the end of Christianity? After all, Macron has promised to rebuild within 5 years, quote, "more beautiful than before," unquote. As beauty is in the eye of the beholder, his word trickery is deceiving the people. The cathedral is France's most powerful religious, architectural and cultural symbol, and images of Notre Dame aflame evoked questions about how the city and the cathedral will move forward. This made it the perfect symbol of moving forward into a new world order. A competition was quickly put in place for the best of the best architects to refashion the awe of this supposed Christian place of worship. The competition, of course, is not to bring the Gothic cathedral back to her pseudo-Christian glory, but to transform her into a multicultural religious centre to be readied for the one world religion. The elite's announcement was correct. Rothschild's puppet president announced to elite architects to design something reflecting their own culture, not French culture. Edouard Philippe, Prime Minister of the French Republic under President Macron, gave an ambiguous statement saying the competition would give the building, quote, "a spire suitable to the techniques and challenges of our time," unquote. A fire brigade official, Philippe de May, said after a cabinet meeting dedicated to the fire, quote, "the international competition will allow us to ask the questions of whether we should even recreate the spire as it was conceived," unquote. Clearly briefed and compliant. The take-home message: Christianity out, Luciferian in. If Notre Dame is not and has never been Christian, then the official statements are less ambiguous than first thought. Indeed, they are totally in context, and whatever her new look, it will in fact be a modern makeover true to the spirit of the first stone that was laid by Pope Alexander III in 1163. 13 million people visited the cathedral every year. They entered through massive carved wooden doors into what everyone thought was a Roman Catholic place of worship to a Christian God, a perfect oxymoron. Notre Dame, in English, Our Lady, is the Babylonian Ishtar, Queen of Heaven. In the Old Testament book of the Bible, Jeremiah chapter 7 verse 18, quote, "the children gather wood, and the fathers kindle the fire, and the women knead their dough to make cakes to the Queen of Heaven, and to pour out drink offerings unto other gods, that they may provoke me to anger," unquote. And in Jeremiah chapter 44 verse 17 to 19, quote, "but we will certainly do whatsoever thing goeth forth out of our own mouth, to burn incense unto the Queen of Heaven, and to pour out drink offerings unto her, as we have done, we and our fathers, our kings and our princes, in the city of Judah and in the streets of Jerusalem. For then had we plenty of victuals, and were well, and saw no evil. But since we left off to burn incense to the Queen of Heaven, and to pour out drink offering unto her, we have wanted all things, and have been consumed by the sword and by the famine. And when we burnt incense to the Queen of Heaven, and poured out drink offering unto her, did we make her cakes to worship her, and pour out drink offerings unto her without our men. Unquote. And Jeremiah chapter 44 verse 25, quote, Thus saith the God of hosts, the God of Israel, saying, Ye and your wives have both spoken with your mouths, and fulfilled with your hands, saying, We will surely perform our vows that we have vowed, to burn incense to the Queen of Heaven, and to pour out drink offering unto her. Ye shall surely accomplish your vows, and surely perform your vows. Unquote. The Virgin Mary, who the Bible firmly states man is not to worship, was crowned Queen of Heaven in 1954 by Pope Pius XII on the 12th of May. Notice the crowning was conducted within the feast of Beltane as Notre Dame's fire. Pius declared that every year there would be a feast of the Blessed Virgin Mary, Queen of Heaven, to commemorate her crowning. Just like the lured pagan feasts, the Feast of Fire is appropriate because Ishtar was the goddess of fornication and prostitution. This is the papacy covertly worshipping Ishtar, hidden in plain sight. It took some 700 years for the Vatican to ready the people into believing that the Queen of Heaven was Mary of the Bible. However, the esoteric meaning was carved in the 1200s. The portal of the Virgin on Notre Dame's west facade depicts Ishtar's timeline, her role at the bottom, her death in the middle, and her ascension to heaven, where she is crowned queen, at the top. Remember, in 1163, before Notre Dame was veiled in Catholicism, it was the site of the Temple of Isis. After the birth of Christ, Mary and Joseph had other children, but it is very important to the papacy that Mary remains a virgin, because she is really the ancient Babylonian goddess Ishtar of Mithraism, who insists on being a virgin. Stepping back further in history, about 2,000 years before the birth of Christ, there was a man named Nimrod, referred to by Freemasons and ancient mystery religion adherents and one world religion movers behind the United Nations as a god. Nimrod was Noah's great-grandson, was the founder of the Baal religion. Nimrod's wife was Semiramis. Semiramis conceived a boy child, Tammuz. Only problem was that Nimrod had died. To save herself, Semiramis told everyone that Tammuz's birth was a miracle, conceived by the sun god, her departed husband. The sun god was part of the Baal worship, as we read in the Bible in Exodus chapter 8, verse 16. To save herself, Semiramis told everyone that Tammuz's birth was a miracle, conceived by the sun god, her departed husband. The sun god was a part of the Baal worship, as we read in the Bible in Exodus chapter 8, verse 16. Semiramis said that because of this, she conceived Tammuz being technically a virgin. So she told everyone that her son was the Son of God. Amazingly enough, the people believed her, even though she had been married and had been a temple prostitute. Concepts such as the Mother of God, My Lady, Queen of Heaven, and Madonna originate from the story, making it easy for early papal Rome under Constantine to fool pagans to become Roman Catholics, as the story matched the Baal worship. Baal came from the name Beelzebub, which is the name for Satan. Doubters stood very little chance to remain non-Roman Catholic. The choice was believe or die. The Vatican death squad hunted Christians for centuries under the title of the Inquisition, forcing them to compromise. This is why many Christians today are concerned with the United Nations one world religion being pushed at the same time that the UN is promoting Pope Francis as spiritual leader of the earth. The United Nations calls Christians terrorists, and further, the UN and the EU international law states that terrorists will be put to death. Semiramis became the female deity, Ishtar in Babylon, holding the title the Queen of Heaven, and was known as the goddess of fertility. In the Babylonian temple, she was looked to as the divine personification of the planet Venus. Different cultures gave Semiramis different names: Virgo, Ishtar, Isis, Ashtaroth, Aphrodite, Astarte, all the same ancient Queen of Heaven, all temple prostitutes. Ashtaroth was the mother figure who cradled her infant Baal. She was known as the goddess of lust. She was the Canaanites' virgin Queen of Heaven, their goddess of fertility, love, and war, that can be read about in the Bible in 1 Kings chapter 11, verses 5 to 6, and chapter 33, and 2 Kings chapter 23 and verse 13. My book, We're Revolting, on Amazon, goes into detail about how the elite come from the Canaanites and where they can be found today. Notre Dame, thought to be Christian but known to be Roman Catholic cathedral, burnt. A new one world religion building of Nimrod is going to be promoted. This makes Chrislam very possible, since most people, even many Christians, think that Roman Catholicism is Christian. In Islam, Muhammad's daughter Fatima is called Queen of Heaven. Some Roman Catholic churches are named Our Lady of Fatima. Fatima is very important to Roman Catholicism and Islam, who share much symbolism, while both highly revering the Virgin Mary, making Chrislam the entrance religion to a one-world religion. First-century Christians had no physical symbolism, not even the cross. That came into fruition with Catholicism. In conclusion, was Notre Dame fire a false flag or not? What are the options? 1. A pure accident resulting from a sequence of unfortunate events. Yet on the 15th of April, Christopher Hale tweeted, quote, "A Jesuit friend in Paris who works in #Notre Dame told me cathedral staff said the fire was intentionally set," unquote. This tweet was only up briefly, then Christopher deleted it. Certainly, hard, extremely dry wood does not smoke in such contorted fashion without a lot of help. 2. A false flag money-making scam. The Roman Catholic Church is not known for spending its money, only other people's. The Vatican has not come forward with any finance to restore the cathedral. False flag Parkland insurance policies paid $11 million. 9/11 was a $2.3 trillion and counting insurance scam that every homeowner on the earth is paying for through their premiums. Notre Dame's $844 million has come from private American donations given to the charity Friends of Notre Dame. The Epoch Times article of June the 18th, 2019 printed, quote, "American donors appear to be leading part of the fundraising drive to repair the fire-damaged Notre Dame Cathedral," religious and business officials revealed in Paris on June 15. Proceeds collected by Notre Dame's charitable foundations have mostly come from American and French individuals and not from the French billionaire philanthropists who promised to donate the hundreds of millions needed to restore the country's national monument. Friends of Notre Dame de Paris estimates that 90% of the proceeds came from American donors, unquote. Macron announced that the cathedral would be rebuilt within 5 years. And why not? That's how the elite do it. Let the public dig into their already overtaxed pockets. 3. Could the fire have been a political coup stunt? Could Macron be using the fire's protective powers to help his presidency in crisis? Is this the elite helping their petit garçon? Was the fire designed to give Macron a break from his dictatorial police state handling of the Yellow Vest movement, a movement that's protesting about the loss of culture by nefarious deals and power-hungry globalists? Andrew Talon, who died 16th of November 2018, was a Belgian art historian who used lasers to create a precise model of Notre Dame. He said, quote, "So much ink has been spilled over that building, so much of it is completely wrong," unquote. 4. Could the fire have been Islamic appeasement? French journalist Maxime Lepont published statistics that show there were 1,062 anti-Christian acts in 2018 compared to just 100 anti-Muslim acts. Quote, 2 churches were vandalized per day. This government, this regime, including the Pope, including the cardinals, shut their mouth, saying nothing when our churches are being vandalized. And in contrast, the minute there is a mosque that has a pot of pork sausages in front of it, there's immediate arrest and prison for the person who did it. Apologies from the whole of France, the stigmatization of racism and so on. It's absolutely unbearable. Double standard. Unquote. 5. Was the fire a smokescreen to take the heat off priest pedophiles or an Islamic Vatican conspiracy? Was the Catholic Church sending a signal to Islam when the apostles and evangelists' copper statues were for no known reason beheaded and unceremoniously paraded in the sky, dragged behind, or is that under, a helicopter, coincidentally only days before the fire? Is this to start Chrislam? If this is so, there'll only be one side who will submit, and that will be the Christians. They already have submitted to Roman Catholicism, so there is no reason to think that they won't roll over once again. An anonymous email received by an American news organization. Quote, "We all know who likes to chop off heads of Christians." Unquote. There may have been a good reason to behead the statues, but the people are asking whether their heads were removed to send a message. Or lastly, 6. Pure, indulgent ritual. Ghoulish demonic-shaped faces seen in the billowing smoke have been caught on camera to rival the ones seen in the smoke on 9/11. We the people will never really know what went down that afternoon in Paris. One thing I've learnt over the last few years is nothing of significance happens by accident. If you like this content and you'd like to support me, like, share and subscribe. Comment down below. Until next time, take care.